My way started with performance. As a visual artist, working with things that were projected on the walls, like things hanging from the walls. I had to do something that was more active and that had more commitment. How do I invite people to be participants in something that is unique for them, as well as for the artist and the actor? And that is how I got to performance. And what you are seeing here is a series of ideas that we did with artists in 2006 and 2007. If you recognize the son of Jorge Porcel, he was one of the guest artists. And this is one of the versions that we did as a peripheral part. This is like a humble version of Art BA. The performance that we are developing, or we have been developing, was a way of painting in a different way without taking a brush and painting on the canvas or the wall. So what is the gesture that I need to create a painting? I'm doing the strokes of painting. So the idea is to invite artists from any technical areas, maybe a poet, a musician, a digital artist, a curator, some gallery directors. Victoria is an artist, a visual artist, and two artists. But the common thread is that when they came to the ring, they would create a painting. Let me show you what it looks like. What you're seeing here is the version in Santiago de Chile in 2006. This was the terrace of a cultural center. Here you can see the buildings, and 200 people were gathered here, and there are two artists. This is me, and at the other corner, we have Luis, one of my best friends. Both of us were focused on doing performances and experimenting with the borders and the boundaries of this way of doing art. So this is the typical environment of contemporary art. So I invited my father. He's helping me with the gloves. He's my father. He would be the arbiter, the referee in this fight. This is live music. There was a live band. So there are people that are taking pictures and filming this, and some other people playing music while we are fighting. Our shoes have red, green, yellow paint. Of course, the technique is not great because neither of us is a boxer. So everyone who came, 24 artists from Chile, Argentina, and Uruguay, all of them were fully immersed. Have you ever been at a boxing ring or in a very intense situation? In general, you don't see the faces, you only see the lights. The attention span is approximately, or the attention stretch is 1.5 meters. There is no other sound or presence that matters. So that reach was a critical one to enable me to find a way to get that focus of attention, your presence at the moment of creating a work of art. And it was in sync with accidents, or it was a coincidence that my father was invited. We have a very particular family history, and I wanted him to be part of this process of showing who we are, where we have been, what we have seen, and how we take part in a community. Even though this is a community that is gathered to watch a fight between two people, there is a gesture of creation. There are some creative traits, and that's what I wanted to show. As a result of those fights, we had this exhibit in Chile. The only thing that could be shown, the only material outcome of that performance were the paintings. Have you seen Cutie and the Boxer? The New York boxer documentary? This performance, this painting on the wall is very similar to what Cutie and the Boxer does in that documentary. And the canvas that you are seeing is the floor of the ring. It is the representation of two people that are fighting, and my father in between, being the referee. He has no idea of what boxing is about. He did not know whether to stop the fight or not, or what rules to enforce. But we were part of that performance, and that's the outcome of it. So how did I evolve from that thing to what I'm doing right now? As most of the artists, we have two ways. One that makes a lot of profit, and then there is another one that produces a lot of profit. Now, the facet I have shown you produced zero profit, but I had a lot of fun. Now, in this new stage, I was invited to be the developer of the Museum of Memory and Human Rights in Chile, in Santiago, Chile. I never talked about my family, my father. So for 1.5 years, I developed the audiovisual system of the Memorial Museum. It is the largest Latin American audiovisual registry. It's a typical phrase. And here you can see me in the picture. I'm very proud. Just before they finished the facade of the museum, without saying that my father was part or was involved in the military dictatorship, trying to do my best from the technical point of view. So I had the white run, or the white trial. People came in, they would use the devices, and the devices not only showed our history from the 50s to the 2000s and the story of dictatorship and repression, but also collecting documentaries and stories about our history, so that people would come to the museum and find out that many other people had faced similar stories. So my work was at the intersection of all of that interaction, enabling a two-way flow, showing the story and also receiving and changing the story. Changing means it's my interpretation. According to the museum, it was a matter of accumulating or hoarding, but I was doing something different. I was shaping history. It's a very flexible and versatile way. We understand it this way this year. Next year, we will understand it in a different way. So we only had a couple of weeks to go before the grand opening, and in March 2010, this is what the interactive device looked like, showing things. In March 2010, the biggest earthquake in the last 100 years destroyed all the devices, all the artifacts, and all the pieces in the show, in the exhibit. So the only thing that I was left with was the system documentation. As you can imagine, for me, it was a major it was a very important milestone in my life, because it was an opportunity for me to make amends, to lay straight or to put straight the history of my family with the dictatorship. So that was my secret. Nobody knew about that. So the earthquake came, it ruined everything, and I had nothing to do about it. I got the document system and I went to Australia, and that's where I created Assent. Now let me share with you what Assent is. Assent is a documentary, an experimental documentary about my father. It is about one particular day in October 1973 when he witnessed the execution by a death squad, and he was there. There was a death squad that was patrolling the country. It was commissioned by the command center to tell people that things were getting serious. It was not only a matter of the capital city, but also throughout the territory. Terror was expanding. So my father was a witness to that execution. He told me that he was there, he was a witness, he had to sign a book. And signing that book meant that he would be associated with that event forever. Until today, he is captive of that remembrance, and he is a witness from the legal standpoint, and they can very easily be the ones that perpetrate the attack, or the ones that are to blame. So Oscar told me one day when I was 20-something, I thought that he would talk to me about the birds and the bees and the world unfolding before me, but he started telling me the story, a very sad story of 15 prisoners. He was only the witness. He was an inactive witness. He had nothing to do with it, but he could do nothing about it. This story started a conversation. It started a dialogue with my father. We have been keeping this dialogue for 20 years. The versions of that conversation have changed. At the beginning, he was warning me about things that I would get to know about in the books or journalistic reports. He was getting me ready to see his name or his last name and my last name in the news, in the newspapers. But then it changed. It was about me receiving his confusion, his rage, so to speak, his disappointment. He was disappointed at reality. He was writing his own story. So this conversation has been evolving for 20 years. There have been many changes, and most recently, it has become, we are now two adults sharing a glass of beer and talking about how things have evolved. And now it's about me trying to giving him support, and he doesn't want to know any more about it. But there is no escape. There is no way out. That's a feeling that he gets, that he is doomed. So now I'm going to show you the trailer of Assent.
Hi, Dad. I'm glad you could see this. I thought the instructions might have been a bit confusing, but here you are, so I guess it worked. I wanted to send you something real, and oddly enough, look what I came up with. Look around. If you stare at certain things for long enough, something happens. We're looking back to 1973. Right on this spot, you have just been notified of a court-martial taking place up the hill. But today, I want you to take the time you didn't take back then, and stay with me for a little longer. La pregunta crucial que apareció en el proceso creativo de Assent era entender cuál es la diferencia entre mi padre, la persona con la que crecí, la persona que
The question was if there was a difference between my father, the person I was fond of, the person I understand, someone who I can share, with whom I can share happiness, a person with whom I can fight with when I eat his bite of ham in the fridge. So that person, that everyday person, your father, he's a person that has nothing to do with the soldier that was on duty there. If you do not know this person, if you do not have that emotional bond with that person, that attachment, I imagine, and this is how I started to understand the other view, the uniform, particularly the Chilean, the Argentine uniform, the Latin American uniform of those years, comes with a certain distance, and I did not learn that until I was an adult. To me, this person and that uniform were different. I was very fond of that person. And when I was 16, 18, or 20 years old, and I started looking at the images with the uniform, there was a detachment between my fondness and my love for my father and the uniform, my aversion to the uniform. So my father is at the heart of that question. And that question is something I wanted to share with other people. Now I have finished my project, but I do not have a conclusive answer. I don't know what the difference is between that person that was close to me and the person with the uniform, but I know what it feels like. So I got structured around painting. My father, I have two facets. One is a multimedia designer, and the other one is an artist, a contemporary artist. My father was an army officer, but he was also an artist. So on Sundays, when he used to paint, we had paintings, oil paintings, and the smell of oil paintings all around the house. And when you came into the house, you would find this world of painting that had nothing to do with the world of the uniform. My father was never an artist, an abstract artist. He was a Sunday artist, so he painted the classics and the Impressionists. His imitations were not very good, but there was a lot of effort in them, trying to copy all the lines and the color blends and the main message that was put across by the painting. So looking for the heart or the core of the work, I resorted to painting. Other artists, when they faced a historical event like Goya, for instance, the executions of May the 3rd. May the 3rd is a continuation of another painting that is called May the 2nd, and these are historical events that are part of the same age. The French troops were coming into France. The locals killed the Turkish troops that were part of the French army. On May the 3rd, the larger French troops executed everyone, captured and executed them. So these are two paintings, or these are like two frames in a same movie, but they are part of a larger narrative. My father painted both. Of course, it took him a long time. It took him 3 years to paint both paintings. This was like the two sides of the coin. So my work, he continued the same tradition, but this was the tradition that Goya had given to the history of art. Mexico. Okay, he painted the execution, or he copied the execution of an officer in Mexico. And so we have the pictorial tradition of the two paintings. Based on McLuhan, when a new artist and a new medium comes, okay, it may be a new artist using the language of a previous medium or an old medium, or there may be a new medium. Oil painting was used by Impressionists. The tradition told us of the 1800s, they were studying the use of light in paintings. But then an American came and he designed the paint tube. Before the paint tube, you needed a friend who was a chemist that would create the pigment and give you, based on a support, the colors, red, yellow, blue. So your palette was based on what the chemist would combine. So with the advent of the paint tubes, it was easier to get the colors. And the place where the paintings were done transformed. The study of light was a construction in a closed space. When we got the painting and the stand or the support, these inventions came at the same time. So painters went out of their ateliers and into the fields, and they found new situations. And paintings also found new painters. Van Gogh appeared, not because he was a genius only. Of course, he was a genius technically, but also painting told Van Gogh, appear here. We have this new medium. We need someone who is crazy about spending the day in the countryside, so that someone will deliver to us their impression of nature. In the same way as it happened with pigments and paintings, the difference between the gesture that is seen here and the gesture that is seen there is also apparent in composition. Vermeer was a master, a Dutch master. He was a master of photorealist representation, and there was a school that followed this trend of hyperrealism. But not long ago, research was made. It was led by David Hockney, and he showed us that composition of this kind of paintings, hyper-realistic composition, was actually done with photographic techniques. Using a dark chamber, the painter or the artist would be inside the atelier and reproduce or imitate the way in which light behaved in the volume that was outside of the atelier, as we can see here. The archaeology studies done by Hockney gave us a certainty that this painting has been done with a photographic approach, which is very different from the approach used by Van Gogh. Of course, the technique is what is changing the way we understand painting. And this moves the entire medium forward. Now we get to the maximum version, which is content, user-generated content. It has to do not only with how paint is moved and the texture of paint. Don't follow me too closely. I'm talking about reality and how the milieu changes it. The texture changes, and the way we experiment with our environment also changes. At the beginning of the 20th century in Latin America, murals became a major artistic expression, not only because of the technique, the artistic technique, but also because of the message that it conveyed. Rivera, Siqueiros were major representatives of this kind of art. But I want to focus on the way in which we experiment and witness painting. Down here, you see the scale. That head, the head of the viewer, is moving, and there is no way of keeping it fixed. It has to move in order to understand what's happening in the different planes and arches. And that movement that we have learned in the West, that it is a Z shape, it has a narrative about it. Once you have started reading in a Z way, all the changes that appear between the higher left corner and the lower right corner, moving your head this way entails a change, moving your head to understand a painting. That change occurs when the user appears. This painting is like the branch that falls in the forest and nobody hears it fall. That is what we are presenting to our audience, but it does not exist if there is no audience, if there is no user. In virtual reality and interactive media, we need the user to be part of the story. And the same thing happens in literature. In Kafka's work or in Camus' work, we have characters that are in the center of the story. They receive the action. They are recipients of the action that the writer is designing for them. But if we think about an interactive version where the user is actually present, we have an example in Hopscotch, the novel by Julio Cortázar. You know that we have different chapters in a linear fashion, but the writer suggests that there is also another way of reading it and gives us instructions. The chapters can be read in a linear fashion, or they can follow a different sequence. If you follow this sequence, the story will have different implications. So the reading act is an act where the user is active. This would be a happy version of Hopscotch as a proto-interactive medium. In Assent, I have also included literature. I have included text as a key ingredient in my work. Text, in addition to the text of the story, the nonfiction content, my support, my literal support was the Divine Comedy, Dante being guided by Virgil through the through hell and then through heaven. And I believed that this was the ideal support. It was a literary mirror of what I wanted to show, and where I wanted to invite users to go. I wanted to show users what it feels like and how it is built, how this place is built, regarding the being uncomfortable living in your own skin or being who you are. So I have shown you what happened with painting and literature regarding the media that I got support from. At the beginning, I also spent some time with dramatical performances. The way of developing theater or drama, carnival, and street performances, music performances, there is another dimension to it. It's not just representing the devil or representing a king. It is also the possibility for people, the users, the street audience, to become a character for 1 hour, 2 hours, for half a day, for a full week. And that willingness to become a different character is something that has to do with the way in which your body changes. Your body, how it is represented with costumes, but also your body language, how your body language changes your willingness to take part in a story. Here I'm showing you Diablada. It's a carnival in the north of Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia. And this is partly a virtual installation. It has been very successful. It is very exciting. It is a flight simulator that turns you into a bird. So you hop onto this bed, which is like a dentist's chair, and it has hydraulic support, which is connected to what you see on the screen of your virtual reality viewer. So if you move your wings or arms inside this viewer, your character will move as a bird. You may go up or down, depending on how you place your arms. You can also maneuver. in the city that you see in the viewer. So that change of what you see on the screen happening right before you has to do with your attitude. You are constantly changing the way in which the story is presented. We may say that in virtual reality, we contribute these experiences, and it's very difficult to find the story here. Yes, of course, it's difficult to find the story in a flight simulator, but when you are in it, when you experiment this, you feel the presence of a world, of a universe, of a narrative universe. It's telling you you are the bird that represents the freedom of this country, or you are the bird that is an endangered species. You are a bird with your own memories, your own imagination, and with a way of understanding what's happening before you. So it's open to your own interpretation. Perhaps it's the way in which you can express your intense narrative desires. There are several characters like Juan Salvador Gaviota, Icaros, and you feel as if you were a bird, and you can do it perfectly. Now, I hope the demonstration works. I'll show you what virtual reality is in basic terms. You have a link where you can experiment this. You may take a picture of this to save the link. And I'm showing you how that simulator that I was showing you, and how virtual reality viewers, as the one that is out of this room, how it works. It's a basic mechanism. It's a gyroscope that is within your smartphones and tablets and other devices. What I'm showing you, it's a game engine. It's called Unity. If you come from Flash, it's like Flash. If you know what Final Cut is, or After Effects, it's the same thing but with interactivity. It's a software program where you can bring your audiovisual and sound components. You can have your code and script, and it puts it all together in a 3D space. Unity gives you, as an author, the ability to see all the elements at play at the same time. So what I'm doing right now is to connect a phone with Unity and show you that the movements I'm performing with the phone, these are movements that the Unity camera is doing at the same time in a 3D space. So I started right here. This would be right, my right. I can look up. I can look down. What you're seeing there could be anything. It's a 3D space. It's basically that space. What we were showing is these cubes in a 3D space. That could be a desert, an island, or inside your own brain, or a city where a bird is flying. So what the phone does is connect with the camera ball. So when I move it, I'm moving the camera real time. So please note that The specific trait of a camera that you cannot control in narrative and creative terms is that it is the key of the user's presence. So I can make these cubes, I can turn them into anything, just anything. You name it. It may be a landscape, a character before you, or if you look round, you may have a different character telling a different story. So these are different characters that have the different versions of the same event. But the key to go from the filmmaking language, from the linear language to a virtual reality language, is that that camera in the middle, all the movement and all the translational movement and all the centers of attention that that camera can do are the movements and the presence of the user. And when I talk about the presence of the user, it's not about letting them touch a button or giving them more information. The user is another character in the story, in fact, and we have to take the user as such. That is the key takeaway message from this presentation. That head is the head of your audience. This is not a passive audience that is just watching. There is a head that is in the middle of the space. It is at the core of our space. Imagine when you are with your loved ones, with your pet, or with someone you are fond of. When you take the head of that cat, for instance, if you are with your pet, you have to be very careful with that. The same if you are with your loved one or with your child. That head is the head of your user. When you move it, when you move that head, what you are doing is watch this other thing. We cannot do that any longer. And we cannot do it with our pet or with our child. And if we can't do it, if it's a problem. That problem is also present in virtual reality. That's why the creation of virtual reality has to do with the suggestion of things that happen. That's why I was showing you other media which are not necessarily the film medium. In general, theatrical performances make a very useful language in the creation of virtual reality, because there is a stage with 2 or 3 actors, and one of them is uttering, is giving an utterance, while the others are using their body in order to make a composition, or maybe they go off the stage, or maybe they are doing something else with their body to create a scene. And those things are crucial to understanding how we present virtual reality. And much in the same way, we have to take off our jacket, the jump cut, and the ellipsis and cut techniques. These are things that are no longer used here. We have to use them to our advantage. We have to take full benefit of them and take advantage of them. Imagine when you are controlling the frame and someone cuts and you see another character and you see a different space. Those cuts that will not respect the movement of your attention or the movement of your head feel very aggressive, more than jump cut in video. So what's happening inside here is a gyroscope. A gyroscope is something that the astronauts use for training, how to avoid getting dizzy or how to control the movement of their body. That same mechanism is also included in the phone or in a tablet. The way in which the rings change position. These are records. The microprocessor that is inside the smart devices, there is information or data that is being transmitted. It may be the microchip that is inside the devices, and it moves the camera. I believe that Mark has talked extensively about what's coming, what's next in the future. But pay attention to what's happening at the commercial, in the commercial perspective. What we saw in the 90s with disappointment was that there was a lot of hype around virtual reality, but the devices and the components were not ready yet. They were too expensive, but now they are available and they are affordable. Since 2012, we have been able to access virtual reality viewers, and the smartphones have really marked a change. So when I tell you pay attention, it's because there will be a launch around Christmas time. In November, we will have HTC, which is a company that is developing smart devices. Then Oculus, you may have heard about it. It's another company that has been developing virtual reality viewers. And then in the first quarter of 2016, we will have Sony's viewer. If Sony is up and about here, then you will get an idea of what the market is about. If we're interested in presenting independent projects, these are the platforms that will be used. And these are the platforms that you have to watch out for. In my study of virtual reality, I'm paying attention to these platforms from the commercial perspective. If you want to experiment, if you want to get home and start playing with virtual reality immediately, the best thing is to get a Google Cardboard. It's only $20, and you only need a phone, an iPhone 5 at least, or a Galaxy 5, and it's really inexpensive. It is not the same experience. It has been defined as the YouTube of virtual reality, and Oculus and the professional viewers are like the IMAX. They are different ways of experimenting virtual reality. It's easy to understand, easy to do, and you only need a game engine like Unity to create content. If you want to experiment only with virtual reality, Cardboard is a way to do it, the way to introduce yourselves into this world. Now let me share with you the two ways in which virtual reality is being developed in 2015. And I emphasize right now 2015 because things will change very quickly when the commercial viewers come to the marketplace. I know that there are people that are developing them. That's why I have this scoop. There will be new cameras. These are not just 360 cameras. These are cameras that will capture images in 3D. Now, the 360 camera, this is a model developed by Google jointly with GoPro. You know what the GoPro is. It's an action camera that they are not only tiny, but also they have an invisible grace or benefit. And you realize why they cost what they cost. They have an algorithm that controls the viewing of the camera. It's not like the Nikon's VR. It's a matrix, or it's a grid that rearranges the pixels within the image. So what I'm saying is that even though they are small cameras, they are talking the language of what other media are also the same language as other medium. GoPro is at the top of all those practices. It is at the lead of all the media. Google partnered with GoPro to create this device that is called Google Jump. What Google Jump does is to record video in 360 degrees around cameras, but it also produces stereoscope vision. When you put your virtual reality glasses, you can see with depth. Do you remember the parallax effect, where you have two planes and they move at different speeds? You get the feeling of depth. This camera provides you with that experience. I have not paying it much attention because what our study is doing, we are focusing on creating an interactive space. To create an interactive space, video is not very good. Linear video, which is what these cameras create, has a problem. It starts and ends, and what happens in between is pre-established, predetermined. What we are focusing on, and now I tell you that you should keep an eye on this, because cameras will die soon. And I know because there are creators that are, or developers that are just about to offer these products, I know that their replacement comes from the side of real-time 3D models. So the vision is a volume. It's not static or one-dimensional view. It's a movement that the user controls. So I'm trying to describe what or how a game behaves. You have models that are right before you, and they are waiting for you to do something, to look one way, to look another way, to activate something, to fight, to give them a welcome, to cheer them. So that technique is enabled with a 3D scanner or with modeling. And now we will see the second demonstration, and I will ask Damien to help me to do the modeling. Can you please come here? What I'm going to show you is a 3D scanner that is connected. You tell us. It's a 3D scanner. I connected it to my iPad. So this is a scanner that is connected to the iPad, which is connected through a wireless connection with my computer that has an Connect software that is receiving combined information for depth and color. So I'm going to scan Damien in real time, and you will see the information appearing on the screen. I'll do it quickly. Thank you, Damien. No pain. It was very quick. And of course, there are many defects. But what I can show you is that I have a model, a 3D model of Damien, that in a way is like a painting. So here I have the trajectory of the scanner. These dots that you can see in front of the model are the positions of the scanner when I was walking around Damien. And also, I get not only depth, not only Damien's image in a single dimension, I get a 3D image, and also the color combination. It's a combination of an infrared sensor and the camera of my iPad. It captures color. In each of the positions of the scan, the iPad was taking a photo. Those photos are projected on the 3D model. Now going back to how we tell stories with this medium, how do I get this character to tell us a story? If I can look at other areas, other places, instead of presenting him as a talking head that is telling us a story, perhaps Damien is telling a story in this frame, but what he is looking at is very different from what we are seeing. The ability of looking both ways or looking around is a challenge for filmmaking, but it is an ability that we get as a gift to tell stories. So we can change the way in which the actor and our character is presented. We may present him as a character that is despicable, or a character that is epic, historical, very important, and those two versions of the same character can be given to the user. So I have shown you how the scanner works. Basically, it's not necessary to pay too much attention to it, but if you ask yourselves how a 3D scanner works, it's a infrared dot matrix that are launched from this sensor, and when they land on a volume, they vary, and that is what the processor understands as a 3D volume. And this is how we can create actors, and this is how I create the actors that appear in Assent, the project I showed you. Actor generation or creation. So how did I approach Assent? Assent was a story that I wanted to share. I never found the right or comfortable place or the safe place to tell that story in Chile. So when I got to Australia, I realized that personally I was feeling confident enough to tell the story. But that feeling was not something that I could extend to my family. So I had to find a way to find the surface of the story without exposing my family. In the process, in the creative process that took me 2 years of writing, I realized that I had to appear in the story, not as myself, but as a representation of my family. All the characters that appear in Assent are my own mannequin. I used my own body, my own dummy. I used myself to represent the presence of my father and of so many other people. In the same way as I showed you with the boxing fights, I spent 20 minutes lying on the floor of my study with being blinded while I was being scanned. So I was the dummy for all of these characters. When I showed the project to a senior citizen that came to the exhibit, this man, when he took the mask off, or the viewer off, he looked at me. I was in England, and he looked at me and recognized the story and told me I was a friend of one of the prisoners. This happened at Sheffield, what Mark was showing. Nobody, I was not ready to react. I said nothing, and he hugged me, that old man who recognized the situation. This moment and the moment when that old man hugged me, these are the reasons for my project for Assent, the reasons for it to exist. If this demo worked, I will say that Benjamin talks about an aura, a work of art, something that is happening right before you. It only happens when it is right before you. It's not something that someone can tell you what it is about. It is not a story. It is the presence of the work of art before you. When that thing appears, I believe that interactivity is present. It's your presence before the work of art, and the work of art being present for you and only for you. For you and for you only. And that is a story. How we showed Assent in Sheffield, in Sundance, and in Sheffield, as Mark showed. Thank you.